On a dusty road in the TNT area just outside the little town of Point Pleasant, two young couples were driving by the old abandoned ammunition plant when something strange, unusual, and terrifying caught their attention. They described it as being around 6 or 7 feet tall, with hypnotic red eyes and a wingspan of 10 feet in width. It was like a man with wings, Mallet said. Linda Scarberry compared it to looking at like what some would describe as an angel. Within seconds of seeing the winged being, they took off in Roger's 1956 Chevy Bel Air. While exceeding speeds of over 100 miles an hour, they raced their way back towards town trying to escape the creature. But that didn't stop the thing from keeping up with them as he flew over top of their car, keeping right along with them as they sped straight to the Point Pleasant police office. From that point on, things changed for Roger and Linda Scarberry and their friends Steve and Mary Millette, all because of the events of that fateful night on November 15th, 1966. They were never the same, and some believe that night was the pinnacle event that resulted in more strange things to come for the small town of Point Pleasant. And it was.
Kingdoms rise and empires crumble, and the knowledge and wisdom from past ages are lost to the foggy ruins of time. But for genuine seekers of truth, one place stands alone on a hill. Shining brightly in the darkness, you, dear listener, have reached the Hidden Citadel.
Hey, welcome to the Hidden Citadel.
Hidden Citadel.
I am your host, Willie Minix, and I am joined with your other host,
Greg Kemp. Nice to have all of you here today.
Thank you guys for listening to us. We are so happy, and today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, the Mothman.
And I got to tell you, other than the movie, which was just awesome,
did you watch the movie?
I did see the movie. I've seen it several times. You know, that whole bridge thing. You know, and it's funny because the bridge scene in the movie is really very minimal compared to when you go through all of the accounts of everything having to do with that bridge, and you know the Mothman in general.
Oh, well, the thing is, like, I watched the movie a couple days ago just to get an idea of you know, how close it was to the actual events. And number one, they set the movie in the 1990s, or what would have been the present day.
Yeah.
And very little of it was actually the story of what really happened. It was more a story based around an event that happened. But I would love to see a movie that actually follows what really happened. You know, a lot closer than what the Richard Gere movie did. But I went to Point Pleasant this last weekend, and I was down there at the Mothman Museum. And it's like the 4th time that I've been there because my parents live in Indiana, and so Point Pleasant is right on the way to go back home whenever I go to visit them. So every time we go, we stop in Point Pleasant for lunch or something like that, and then we go buy Mothman T-shirts and merchandise.
Yeah, as you should.
All that kind of stuff.
Did you get a picture in front of that metal thing? That
I did, and I have several pictures from over the years of me in front of that
thing is
metal
awesome.
Mothman.
You know,
I'll have to send you one
so
where the Mothman's
fascinating.
like grabbing my head. Do what?
Yeah, it's just so fascinating because, you know, there's something about it. You know, when you conceive of some of the unclean spirit or demonic or even angelic kinds of things in Scripture, I think you start off with something largely similar to what the Mothman has been depicted as. But in Scripture, when you start looking, it's funny. The more that you read Scripture, the more you either have something that's very humanoid, like the guys just who would visit, like, you know, who, you know, just seemingly like a lot or something, you know, those guys who are like bipeds and stuff. Or you have like the seraphim or something with like multiple wings and multiple eyes and all that stuff. And so it doesn't have the kind of distinct kind of regular conditions that you'd have when you like, all right, draw an angel or draw something either angelic or something. Because one of the things you're going to do is when you think demon, when you're little, you think red eyes and you think wings, and you think think terror. And this thing just checks all those boxes.
Oh, yeah. Well, the other thing, like my wife said, she was like, why do you want to have a picture of a demon on your shirt? And I'm like, we don't really know that he was a demon. I mean, yes, he caused fear. And I've heard people talk about this, you know, if it causes you to be that afraid and be paralyzed with fear, it must be an evil thing. And it's like, but wait a minute. The first thing angels ever said to anybody when they showed up in the Bible was fear not. So there was something about them that caused complete panic in a person whenever they showed up. So we don't really know. And then it seems like the entire time the Mothman was trying to tell people, hey, the bridge is going to collapse.
Yeah, there's that interpretation, which is really interesting too, because what angels do more than anything else is they're messengers. They're delivering information, either prophetic or important in the moment. I mean, that's their role. Like, you know, the angel's primary role is a messenger.
So, where were we? We were talking about the Mothman.
Yes.
And we were talking about Point Pleasant. I've been there several times. The museum's interesting. I'm going to insert clips that I recorded at the museum. I didn't really talk much while I was there because I just thought I could have them playing in the background while we were here. And one of the things that I found out is they actually give tours. Like they will take you around on a bus to all the cool sites where Mothman sightings happened. And I think they also do I think it's called the Flatwoods Phantom or the Flatbush Phantom or something like that, is another creature that was sighted before the Mothman was sighted. And what I think's interesting about that phantom creature is it's almost similar in a lot of ways to the Mothman, but it's different enough to where it gets labeled as its own thing. But I'm like, well, a caterpillar is different enough from the moth that it turns into that what if this phantom creature was the moth or the caterpillar version of what became the Mothman later?
That's really kind of interesting. Now, when was the, first of all, two questions. When was the last sighting or the most recent sighting of Mothman?
Okay, so here's the thing. There are still sightings happening of the Mothman around the world. And so a lot of times, like there was a sighting in Chicago. I believe it was at the airport during a blizzard. There was a sighting in New York. There was one in Poland. It's like there's been sightings all over up until like just a couple years ago. And I think the big one that I remember reading about, I think was in 2013, was like several people saw the Mothman. I think it was at an airport. I think that was the airport one. And the weird thing about the Mothman is it's not like, oh, it's just some guy out in the back road somewhere and he happens to see the Mothman. A lot of times these are credible witnesses like sheriffs, police, air traffic controllers, or people that work at they're not just like, you know, a drug addict or something, you know, on the side of the road that has a vision. It's like these are people just doing their job, and then they see something incredibly weird, and there's usually corroborating witnesses with them to be able to say, oh yeah, I saw that too. What on earth was that thing?
Okay, good. Our second question is TNT. What did that mean? What were they were talking about TNT.
Trinitrotoluene.
Okay.
So there was actually a nuclear waste containment area right there in the old TNT factory where they built dynamite for blasting, because West Virginia is, up until recently, well, even now I think it still produces it. It was a huge coal-producing region in the country. Yeah. And so they would use TNT a lot to blast out these mines to get the coal out. And this was a place where originally they had developed the TNT to go to the mines, and then sometime after World War II, it got shut down and it became a nuclear waste disposal place. And so a lot of people say, "Oh wow, the Mothman, he must have been a mutated whatever." And there you go. Did you get to watch the video I sent about? Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's fascinating when you really get into that. It's almost, it's kind of funny. It's almost kind of like the idea of sinful pride, that something that's actually damaging for you, you're actually thinking is enhancing you and making you better. And the idea of that nuclear waste will somehow bring out something that is superior to you. It's
like the whole X-Men.
Yeah.
It's like the whole X-Men idea. Whenever you have a mutation, you don't end up with superpowers. You usually end up as like a drooling
hospital
person in a chair. Yeah, right.
It's a lot of surgeries
with superpowers.
A lot of healthcare issues.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I have yet to see a mutation that actually benefits anybody.
Yeah. I mean, what was that movie with John Travolta where he was like a genius out of nowhere?
Oh, Phenomenon,
yeah, ended up being a tumor. Ended up being a tumor, and he died.
I went and saw that movie when it first came out just because Eric Clapton had a song in it, and then I was like, at the end of it, I was like the only person at the movie theater, and I was like, why did I watch this?
I liked a lot of it. I mean, it's really interesting. Well, anyway, we'll get back to we'll do that one another time because that has to do with that has to do with brain capacity and how many of us, how do we all have equal access to all parts of intelligence all the time, but for time and condition? I don't know, but we can get into that another time. Back to the Mothman.
Yeah, that'd be a really good show, Mothman.
Yeah, Mothman. It'd be great if we talked about the Mothman. It's funny that one of the...
Have you ever found yourself invited to an event and not really knowing what the right apparel was to wear? If you wear something that's a little too classy, like a suit or something, you might feel out of place if everybody else is casual. If you wear something too casual, you might look around and notice that everyone else is dressed up and say to yourself, I'm just not dressed up for this occasion. Well, here at the Hidden Citadel, we have the perfect solution to this problem. Why don't you go buy yourself a Hidden Citadel tee today, and you can wear it anywhere. It's perfect for every occasion. You can wear it to a casual meeting. You can wear it to a business dinner. You could even wear it to a formal event such as a wedding or a funeral. All of these places and more are appropriate to wear a Hidden Citadel tee. And what's even more wonderful than just wearing the Hidden Citadel tee is you'll be supporting the work that we're doing here at the Hidden Citadel. So why don't you do yourself a favor and go buy yourself a Hidden Citadel t-shirt today. The link is down below in the description. Have a great day.
The accounts is kind of like just kind of a nightmare I've had, and that's just like when they pass it and they see it in the air, and then they look in the back, they're driving and they look in the rearview mirror and the thing's coming up on them. And
well, here's the weird thing, okay?
Yeah.
So at the museum, they talk about how the car actually got sent to the police department, and the Mothman apparently had clawed the back of the car.
Yeah.
And the police took pictures of this car, right? And apparently there's differing accounts, and I'm not sure exactly which is which. Some people say that the owner went and got the car repaired, and so, they painted over the claw marks. But there were a lot of documented pictures of it that at some point when the Men in Black showed up, all of these pictures of the claw marks disappeared out of the police station, and the cops have no idea where they went to. So it's kind of an interesting, what happened to
that's
it
how
then,
that's how close the Mothman came to the car.
Yeah, he was right on
And
it.
one interpretation is he was trying to slow them down to try to prevent something from happening. Or is that
Maybe,
different?
I don't know,
Yeah.
but they were just flying because they were like so afraid of it.
Yeah, they were
that
accelerating.
They didn't,
Yeah.
want to stick around.
Yeah.
And I was like, I would really like to know. I don't know enough about old cars. I should ask my dad.
Yeah.
But the idea that a 56 Chevy Bel Air is doing in excess of 100 miles an hour, that seems really fast for 1966. But, I could be totally wrong about that. But I have driven around the roads in West Virginia, and I'm like, man, I would not want to be driving 100 miles an hour at night in those mountainous roads.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'd have to be really scared or really stupid,
Right.
one or the other, to be driving that
It was-
fast. Because it's a very curvy road to get into Point Pleasant, and you've got to cross a couple different bridges just to get into town. And it's not just the Silver Bridge that collapsed. There's also other bridges that went, and I imagine back then they were probably smaller and not as well built bridges,
What were the bridges?
But-
What are they crossing? What's the water source that they're crossing?
Well, the one water source is the Ohio River. That's the one the Silver Bridge crossed.
Okay.
And then there's a tributary that comes off of the Ohio River that heads south, that there's another bridge that goes across that one. And I think that's probably the one that they went over to get into town when they were fleeing from the Mothman, when they were out in the mountains. And the mountains aren't huge. I mean, they're not like the Rocky Mountains or anything like that, but they're definitely not the kind of thing that you want to be flying 100 miles an hour on
Right.
down a road like that. Now they're pretty nice roads, but I'm just imagining back in 1966, they probably were just country roads at that
Right.
time.
Are they paved? The ones that
They are now. I don't know if they were back then.
Yeah, I would say
And you
100
got to
miles
remember,
an hour.
like West Virginia, that's fast.
That's fast.
But you gotta think too that back then in West Virginia, they weren't the most affluent, area. They were fairly impoverished in West Virginia at that time, and Point Pleasant would have been considered, even though now it's like a small little town, it probably was considered kind of an important, place in West Virginia, because it's the first place that you come to when you get into West Virginia, when you cross the Ohio at that point. And that part of southern Ohio, even now, is pretty desolate. So Point Pleasant was probably the place where people went to go shopping or buy Christmas gifts. And that's why it was at Christmas time, that everybody had been doing their Christmas shopping when the bridge collapsed.
Wow. That is so. Where does it stand today? Like, what's the current theory on Mothman? Like, what do they say, or is it just sensationalist?
Well, did you get to watch the Monstrum episode
Yeah. That was with the doctor, whatever her name is.
Yeah, Zarkov. She
Yes.
sounds like she should be in a Flash Gordon movie.
She does. Zarkov. Or
She's
Guardians
a
of the
very
Galaxy.
rationalist kind of person, and her theory is, it was a sandhill crane. I'm sorry, but we have cranes here in North Carolina. Every time I go fishing, they're all over the place. And I would never, ever, ever look at a sandhill crane and say, oh my gosh, that looks like a man with wings.
Yeah. With red
Unless he
eyes.
was like the scrawniest man you've ever seen.
Right.
I don't care how dark it is at night, I would still never look at that and say, oh my gosh, it's a man with wings. It just wouldn't happen. And the other thing, is I don't think a sandhill crane can fly 100 miles an hour. I mean, maybe coming down the side of a mountain really fast, he might get up to 50 or 60 miles an hour.
Right.
But 100, really? And scratching the back of a car?
What about the eyes? The red eyes?
Well,
Do they
they
have
say
red
that
eyes?
that's
The
like
red
the
sandhill
glint. Some cranes have a reddish patch around their eye.
Okay.
And so they're like, okay, well, they saw the red patch. I'm like, wait a minute, it's night. You're not going to make out details.
Yeah.
Number one, the eyes are not going to be glowing red, even if it was like, how the light from a car might reflect off of the eyes of say a cat or something
Sure,
crossing the
sure.
street.
Yeah.
I don't think birds do that, for one, because I watched a video where somebody was saying, yeah, that's not something that happens with sandhill cranes. And on the other hand, it's like you're not going to see it glowing for any great length of time. It would just be a quick flash, and then it would
Correct.
be over.
Like a reflector.
And it'd be a flash where if you have 4 people watching it, one would say, oh, yeah, I saw that. And another person might say, well, I didn't see that, but, I take your word for it.
Right.
You wouldn't have all 4 people say, yes, its eyes were glowing and it freaked us out. And you also got to remember, we're dealing with 1966, rural West Virginia. These people hunted, fished, trapped. They lived up and down the river. A lot of people were involved in outdoor activities like that. And, I know hunters. You and I both have been fishermen and hunters and stuff like that. And it's like, you're out there in the woods. You're not, there's not too much that really freaks you out or scares you when you're out there.
Right. Well, you've seen it all. And also you've seen enough of nature to know what the crane looked like. They'd basically be experts on the local flora and fauna, and so this was something. This reminds me of the depiction of the disciples on the boat with Jesus, and that storm that hit. They're fishermen, and that's what they do for a living. And I'm sure they've endured many storms. This was not
exactly
what they endured. There was not a storm because they were afraid. They wouldn't be afraid if it were just a storm. That was a spiritual attack. That was something much greater than that. So it's, to your point, that's exactly the case. These are very live by nature, around nature, within nature, understanding nature. Why? Because of survival. And so when you have that, you're kind of expert on everything. So with something weird, it's going to be truly weird.
Yeah, and just think about this. Literally less than, what would it have been? About almost exactly 20 years before World War II ended. Yeah. And about 10 years before that was the Great Depression, and West Virginia was one of the hardest hit places in America during the Great Depression. So these people, these young people's parents, were people that they probably had, like my grandma grew up in rural Kentucky, about a couple hours from where this happened in West Virginia. And she was like, we would eat anything we could find. Possum, a squirrel, whatever. Wow. We would go out hunting for it. If it was roadkill, you believe we would cook it and eat it.
Wow.
She was like, if it was fresh enough, because she was like, there was no food at all during the Great Depression. And it's like, that's the same kind of people. Like my grandmother lived in an even more rural area of Kentucky than Point Pleasant in West Virginia, but still, we're not too far removed from that time period. So these people were not stupid. They may be country, but they're not dumb country,
No.
They're wily, they're crafty, they know how to survive, and they sure as heck know when something's got glowing red eyes and is a man with big eagle's wings.
Right, something out of the ordinary, and they are very well equipped and very knowledgeable about what is ordinary in their not only food source, but where they live, where they, they've decided to, survive.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, too, that is other weird things were happening. It wasn't just the Mothman. So, at the time, there were 3 events that I think about that kind of stand out to me as really weird. The first one is, I'm going to go kind of in order of weirdness.
Okay.
The first one is this woman, John Keel was the reporter that Richard Gere kind of vaguely plays in the movie. And John Keel had a person would go around and tell people, hey, I am John Keel's secretary and I want to get more information. And it was a strange lady that I don't think anybody ever really got her name. And she would say that she was his secretary. And then when they asked John Keel, hey, we already talked to your secretary about this, he's like, I don't have a secretary. So it's just strange that there was this woman going around. And some people, I think, I could be wrong about this, but I think I remember that they said that it was actually a man that would come and ask the questions. Then you had the next strange thing were the Men in Black.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure if this is the first time we ever hear about the Men in Black in popular culture, but it's definitely one of the first times. And I know the Roswell event kind of had Men in Black associated with it too, but I don't know how far after Roswell the Men in Black came. But anyway, in this one, people would come to, Men in Black would show up and people would say it was weird. It was almost like they were wearing clothes that didn't fit. It was almost as if they all had wigs that didn't quite match, you know, like it didn't really fit their head.
Oh, I did see that part.
Okay.
They were talking about that. It was almost like it's bulbous, and their face was like,
yeah,
yes, their head was bulbous,
and
but
then,
their face was almost detached or thrown forward from the
And their skin was almost white to the point of being translucent.
Yeah.
To where it like was weird. And then one of the guys, when he came to interview somebody, he had like a big horse pill, and he said, "I'm going to need a glass of water in exactly 10 minutes." And so in 10 minutes, he starts to like get flushed and acting a little strange. And he says, "I'll take that water now." And he takes the water and he takes his pill. And then all of a sudden he's back to quote unquote normal, as normal as he can be. Yeah. And then they would flash like ID cards and badges that the people couldn't really make out. So they never really knew what agency they were from. And, so that's the second weird event. And then the third one is this guy named Indrid Cold. And Indrid Cold, like the first guy he appeared to, the guy was in his car and it was raining really hard and he couldn't really see him. And the guy was like, "Can you roll your window down?"
That's right.
And he had just seen like a UFO. And then the guy's like, "Yeah, I'm from the UFO and I'm an alien." And, you know.
Wait,
and
he talked to him in telepathy. Remember?
Yeah.
And then he said, "Can you roll your window down?" And they're like, and the commentators are like, "Why would he need the window down if he could hear him with telepathy?" And they said, well, he wanted to be able to see him, or in person.
It's pretty crazy. We need to do a show on telepathy too. That'll be. My daughter was asking me about, can Satan read your mind? And I was like, well, the standard answer from Christians is no. But I'm like, your dog can read your mind.
Yeah.
If your dog can read your mind, Satan sure can read your mind too. But no, Indrid Cold was like a weird dude, and he kept showing up, and then he would like call people on behalf of the guy. Yeah, he's not crazy. Apparently, he went to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I don't know which one, but they took him to this person for help. And the guy was like, "You know, you're really imagining this Indrid Cold." And all of a sudden, Indrid Cold calls the guy, the psychiatrist, and he says, "No, he's not imagining. I'm Indrid Cold, and I'd be happy to come meet you in your office." And apparently he did.
That is wild, because that means he was
Can you imagine if an alien contacted you at school and said, no, your student's not hallucinating. I'm actually an alien, and I'd like to meet you. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. How big was this guy? How tall was he?
I think he was a little taller than ordinary, if I remember right.
Well, how tall is the tall man?
Well,
the slender man?
Which I don't know. I don't know enough about the Slender Man other than I know that he's like, doesn't he only appear in like people's dreams?
No. I mean, I think there's been pictures of him. People have, but the Slender Man has encouraged.
So the Wikipedia article says Indrid Cold, aka the Grinning Man, is a mysterious man believed to have been connected to the Mothman, first encountered by Woodrow Derenberger. And then there are other Indrid Cold characters from other things like video games and stuff. But it doesn't say how tall he was.
It's like Slender Man, I want to say, is like, he's got to be like 7 or 8 feet tall.
Oh, he has to be.
But they'll show him. There's been pictures where I do think that you're right. There's been, especially with teenagers, when there's been violence, they said that the Slender Man told me to do it, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
But I want to say that there's been.
But I don't know that Indrid Cold ever, like, told anybody to be violent. But let's see if it's got anything here.
Well, why do they call him the Grinning Man?
Because he was constantly smiling in a weird, abnormal way whenever he was talking to people. Like, he just had this real big, weird grin, like, I'm friendly, I'm okay, you can trust me. But he had a look of like, well, maybe he's kind of nuts. You know?
That's hysterical.
I'm trying to look at the first sighting. I found something in... Oh, I don't know. But other people saw him too. So it's not like it was only Woodrow Derenberger that came up with the guy. It was on November 2nd of 1966 in Parkersburg, West Virginia, at around the same time and area as the Mothman. So he was driving home on Interstate 77 and he heard a crash, and then an unidentified vehicle appeared to land in front of his truck, and then that's when Indrid Cold got out of the spaceship, I guess, and came and talked to him.
So what we're looking at is...
he doesn't look abnormally tall. The picture of him just looks kind of like... I mean, this picture, I don't know if you can see it. It looks kind of like the Joker.
Yeah. So wait, were there any actual photographs of him?
I don't think so. But there are interviews that you can go find of... Wait a minute. This is a picture of a guy they called himself Valiant Thor. Try to get it in focus. It's not really coming through. I'll text it to you.
Valiant Thor?
Valiant Thor.
Okay.
But some people like to look at Indrid Cold as the same person as Valiant Thor. There, I just texted it to you.
All right.
The link. So yeah, so basically you've got...
But we're not looking at Mothman just as a singular like entity to kind of and explore, like, I don't know, like Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot. It looks like Mothman represents a whole bunch of weirdness that happened in that area.
Yeah.
And he's just one of the several,
But he kind of went on to have a life of his own. So, like, there's been a lot of Mothman sightings by himself without Indrid Cole and the Men in Black and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
He kind of has gone on to live his own existence. What about this for a theory? What if the aliens came and the Mothman was their pet of some sort and he got loose? And then Indrid Cole and the Men in Black are sitting there trying to catch him and track him down and bring him home so that he won't cause any more havoc amongst the humans.
All right, I got another one. So that area, the whole area there is very much mining and digging and exploring. Like, where Earth is very like digging in. And what if somebody unearthed something that had been in the depths? Let's in biblical speak, this was like something that was kind of in Sheol, like it was under somewhere, and it was not supposed to be brought back up.
Yeah.
And they kind of released it. There's that movie Reign of Fire, which it's in England, and they're blasting and they set loose some dragons.
Oh yeah, I remember that movie.
Yeah. Well, what if that area has, because there is something. There's been a lot of mystery. We know more about the depths of the ocean than we do the depths of the earth. That's
true.
And Chuck Missler used to say, what's the distance away from God? If God is everywhere, then the farthest away from God would be the middle of the earth.
Yeah. And the other thing too is, at some point I want to get into the hollow earth theory, and I want to get into the idea of the underground oceans and things of fresh water and things like that, and the fountain of youth and all that kind of stuff. I think that we need to explore that a little bit more. And what if the Mothman is just a resident? What if it's not the Mothman, it's the Mothmen?
Yeah.
And they're just residents of this place, and somebody opened up a tunnel to their realm of existence.
Yeah, if only there was a female form of Mothman that we could think of a name, but shucks, there isn't. That would represent a monster that would be supernatural, that would have a female title to it. Like, what could that be? Oh, I know, Mothra.
That's what I was gonna say.
The Mothman came. He actually wrote. It's like Bellerophon and Pegasus. It's like
That's it.
Bellerophon. Bellerophon is really like the Mothman, and Pegasus is Mothra.
Is the
and,
Mothra?
Yeah, that'd be a great story.
And they have little moth
Mothra
babies.
was released, and the Mothman is going around trying to find, secure his ride again.
That's
I got to get Secretariat back. I got to harness her. No, but that'd be cool. I mean, but given all right, but going back to what you're saying before, what's unique about that area? Well, you do have. There is that the nuclear dumping area. You have that's very unique to it. You have the mining area. You have the chemical part of it. There's a lot of things there that suggest that there's something very unique about that in some way, and it could very well be. Go ahead.
The other sighting I forgot to mention is Chernobyl. There was supposed to have been a Mothman sighting somehow connected with that.
That's really interesting. Well, and Joe Rogan pointed out that the majority of the UFO sightings really increased right after the use of nuclear weapons in World War II.
Yeah, I got a theory. I've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about Skinwalker Ranch and all the weird. You really got to watch that show to see kind of what I'm talking about. But so they're always finding, like, they do things like they shoot a rocket in the air and then a UFO appears. They set off a weather balloon and then a UFO appears. They do lasers in the sky and then a UFO appears. They beam this signal of 1.66 kilohertz or something like that into the air and then a UFO appears. What if a lot of these UFO sightings are the Atlanteans this is my theory that I'm working on. Way back a long time ago, before the flood, the Atlanteans had a super advanced civilization, and they went to Mars, and they went to other places like the moon and all that kind of stuff, and they had outposts that they set up on these other places. Maybe they set up an outpost in Skinwalker Ranch. Maybe they built, Tiahuanaco or Teotihuacan or whatever that place is. Maybe they built Pumapunko, and maybe they built the pyramids or whatever, okay? Mm-hmm. Whenever these UFOs go off, it's almost as if the way a laser would, if you shine I went to a night park or a dark park up in Virginia one time where it's supposed to be as dark as you can get so you can actually do astronomy. And a lot of people take lasers and they point at the stars with these lasers, and you can say, okay, there's a star, and then you move the laser, and immediately, like faster than the speed of light, you're pointing at another star just because you're jerking your hand around.
Wow.
Now, if you were looking at that and you're like, oh, it's a UFO, what if all of it is, what if UFOs, at least the balls of light that people see, the Tic Tacs and the things like that, what if they're a sort of a alarm system that the ancients built, and then whenever you do these things, you're activating the alarm system, and it starts shooting off these sensors that are collecting data on what just triggered the alarm, and they're still functioning after thousands of years.
That's a little cool. As you're saying it, I thought you were gonna make it like the kitten theory, where you if you like put light on the floor somewhere, the kitten's gonna go after it. So in other words, whatever we send up in the air, it kind of like has to answer it with like, what was that?
Yeah.
Like,
well, that could be it too. But seriously, it would make sense if you were an outpost. I mean, just think of a military outpost nowadays. They have cameras. Yep. They have security guards. Yeah. They have different, sometimes they have different weapons that are activated for various things. They have their barbed wire. You know, this is with our technology. If we were an incredibly advanced race of people that had seriously advanced technology, what would our outposts look like? And I was thinking, well, you might have different light systems that collect data, or do scans or things like that. Some of on the Skinwalker Ranch, some of those balls of light actually lit like a fence on fire, and it burned a hole right through the fence. And they're like, how in the world did this happen? Like nothing. It's as hot. The fence was burnt in such a way that like only a plasma torch could burn a fence. So it's like, well, what if that's a security system?
That's really interesting. It's interesting too, because whether it would be the Atlanteans or something else. You go back to like Job, and the beginning of Job starts off with it seems like a to and fro of angelic beings, or Elohim, right? Spiritual beings going to and fro from the earth to the heavens, right? Mm-hmm. And so, all right, so those aren't men.
No.
And they appear to be flying. And they appear to be coming in and out of our atmosphere. And checking on us. Where are they coming? They're finding out that it's and gathering information, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, and it's happening constantly. Well, you wonder if, whatever we are doing with technology, it's almost when it reaches a point, it may reveal what's already there. In other words, these things, it's happening all the time, but when we do something significant, it reveals, what's kind of already, you think back, and there's a logic behind this too. I'm thinking of it right now, by the way. I haven't really thought about this, so excuse my meandering.
That's okay.
But the Tower of Babel episode, whatever, event, right? Mm-hmm. Was a time where there was a unity, and a unity was the unity of everyone was able to do something almost simulating something supernatural in what they were creating, because it is said there's nothing they won't be able to do. And what happened then? They were scattered in their languages, okay, but then during the time of Pentecost, the languages were returned, and they could understand. Yep. So it was like it was concealed and then revealed, right? I think initially. So what if sight and what if perception and reality is the same way? That it's been revealed, it's been concealed, but at various times we have, because of stuff that we're doing technologically or whatever, there is glimpses of what is actually there, and that could be greater technology, it could be greater beings, it could be a lot of other things, and I do think there are greater beings we got to believe that anyway.
Right. I feel like also with the Book of Job, it's not okay. A lot of theologians are like, well, the Book of Job is an allegory, it's a play. I don't really buy that. I think it's actual. This is what happened.
Yeah.
And it's not, it doesn't treat the supernatural parts of the Book of Job as unusual. That's a matter of fact. There's communication between the divine and us,
Yes.
And what's interesting about that is Job is supposed to be probably the oldest written biblical book. Mm-hmm. And so it's at a time period, probably shortly after the flood, where people are starting to rebuild again. The civilization is kind of growing. We really don't know when Job happens, and we really don't know if it was before or after the Babel event.
Yeah.
If it was before, then we're talking about a time period that is not that far removed from people being able to remember, oh yeah, this was what happened. This is what the world was before the flood.
Yeah. And now, I mean, and being able to interact And having a more of a natural and common occurrence of supernatural interaction. The farther we get away from that, the more supernatural seems just like supernatural. Seems kind of weird, scary, not unusual, but like, more agnostic or, atheistic in a way. Just like supernatural doesn't exist. Come on, it's only science and reality, and that science and what our senses can perceive, and that's it. Like the empiricists would say, So it's like, but yeah, you're right. The closer you get, the closer you can put yourself to the time where the supernatural was the natural. Then you're going to have it. You're going to have the accounts of that be something that, when they're talking about it, it would seem like, holy cow, what was going on there? It would seem beyond, like, fantastic, beyond our belief.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that a lot of people, they don't really think about that, the implications of what that means when they're reading the Bible. They don't think about these are people. And especially, like, if you read, like, J. Warner Wallace's stuff, where he talks about, like, he's the Cold Case Christianity author, and he talks about how plausible and believable the biblical writer's witness was, and how these guys give testimony the way a normal, credible witness would give testimony. But here they're giving testimony to events that are supernatural in a similar way that the Mothman witnesses are giving credible testimony.
Correct.
I mean, we're talking about sheriffs. I mean, think about this. This is what ticks me off about the whole monstrum, Dr. Zarkov explanation. I know it's not her explanation, but it seems like she subscribes to it. You can't have a credible, intelligent person who becomes a sheriff. I mean, not all sheriffs are the most brilliant person in the world, but they're not morons. I mean, they know how to do their job, and they've seen a lot of stuff. And a lot of these guys that became sheriffs in the 60s were World War II veterans. Yeah. Like, a lot of these guys had gone off and fought the Nazis. Yeah. They'd seen the concentration camps. Yeah. They'd seen the horror of war. They're not easily shocked.
No.
These are guys that they've seen some really tough, bad stuff, and they come back out of it and they're like, I survived. I'm going to do my job and I'm going to be a sheriff.
Yeah.
Okay. And yet this guy is the one giving you testimony. Yeah, I saw the Mothman, and I don't know what I saw, but man, it was something like I've never seen before.
Yeah, that's such a good point. You think, I know it's like really out there at the tangent, but that greatest generation, or even just that those who are enduring just unbelievable human suffering and violence and hatred, and that they weren't afraid of things. You look at there's that classic picture of those 11 guys on that beam in New York City eating lunch. We are wusses. We have
that, or we used to have that in our hallway upstairs.
I mean, I just feel like that is they went off to work and
they did the job. They didn't care.
They were circus performers. I mean, they're doing some things that people would gasp at if they were watching from a tent at Barnum and Bailey. And yet they were doing this every day, and then going home
every single day
and playing catch with their kid in the yard like nothing happened.
Yep.
So, again, like you pointed out, this has to be something that is so out of the ordinary, even for people who lived out of the ordinary from what we think right now.
Well, and the other thing, too, I want to address one other possible idea. We're talking 1966.
Yeah.
Okay? The Summer of Love was 68, 69, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. So we're not too far removed from the whole LSD thing.
Yeah.
Now, my dad talked to me a lot about growing up in the Midwest in the 60s. The Midwest was very opposed to, drug use and stuff like that. And the local colleges, they would get kind of, some of these people come from California or New York or wherever, and the town people would just kind of shun that.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not like you're having rampant drug use going on out there in rural. I mean, maybe they were drinking and maybe moonshiners and stuff, but you're not going to have people tripping out on LSD. However, we do know that the Monarch project was going on, and we don't know anything really about where they were experimenting. And so it's like, could they have possibly spiked the wall? This, I've never read this anywhere, not even at the museum or anywhere. I'm just wondering about this right now. Yeah. Could some CIA operative have spiked the water in West Virginia? And you being a psychologist, you would know a little bit more about this. How would that affect an entire community if something like that was going on?
Well, I think it would, more than anything, it wouldn't. I think the thought or sensory distortion that would take place would be more impairing. I don't think they would be. Mm-hmm. I don't think they would be functioning in a regular way, but for some hallucinations and that sort of thing. I think if something was in the water and that sort of thing, it takes over the body and the brain. I mean, the brain is a very sensitive thing. So if there's a poison in it, or even a mild poison, it doesn't really, it doesn't go on with its daily whatever. It's inhibited. Just think about how very little things, a stuffy nose can give you a headache. It's very sensitive. So, but I think you're onto something if you say, what if there was enough chemicals, by way of like going back to that it's the nuclear dump, all the various things that are going on, and maybe there was pockets of, because there are pockets of things like gases in the earth. That's without true. There's without argument.
Well, that's what they say. The Oracle at Delphi was getting her information from hallucinogenic gases that would come, and she would get hallucinations, and then she would give a trance or go into a trance and then spout off something, and that's really what was happening to her.
Yeah, but I mean, you could have it. You could have, if there's enough of that in the air, not necessarily in the blood, but if I'm just wondering if there was. Because isn't it gas that really kind of creates like the aurora borealis and some of there's lights in the sky and that sort of thing. It's really based on a gas.
Maybe I don't know. That's something I haven't investigated. I have to look into that.
Well, and if that's the case, there could be something, but still, for all four people to have different accounts and see the same thing.
What is it they call folie à deux? Where?
Yeah, folie à deux. Yeah, and it's called shared psychotic disorder. But it usually means that one person is kind of generating it and imposing it on the other one, who is more of an acolyte and will follow what they say. But that's two people, and one person can do it to two people. It's very difficult unless it's a cult over time. That one person can do it over four or three.
Right. Or a whole group.
A group, yeah. It might be, I think it'd be a little bit tougher there. But
a lot of people like to say, well, that's all that was happening with Jesus' miracles. And it's like, no, you're not going to have 5,000 people with folie à deux. It's just not, it's not the way it works.
Right. I mean, there are certainly social psychic experiments by a guy named Muzaffar Sharif and Solomon Asch, in which they put something up and challenged one person, at least one person, to change their perception based on everybody else's account. So everyone else said, in Solomon Asch's experiment, there were 3 lines on one side of a card and 1 line on the other, and it was line A, B, and C, and really C was the same length as the original line.
I've read about this experiment.
But Solomon had 6 of his confederates say no. B, they didn't say no. They said which one is the closest one to the regular line? Oh, B is.
And they said B.
And they got to the guy who was off the street who thought he was just one of the group. And he's like, B, because everybody else said that. But then you have Muzaffar Sharif did something really interesting too. He had it's called the autokinetic effect, and it's really something that you kind of have with with lights in the sky like stars. If you stare at them long enough, they appear to move. So he put a light on the one side of the room that if you stare at it, you can probably convince yourself that it looks like it's autokinetic. It looks like it's moving. And so he would bring, because of that effect, he'd bring somebody in and bring other people in. And, you know, they all thought they were part of the same. He's like, why don't you tell me how far it moves from its original location? I actually had Trevor, your wife, participated. She was one of my Confederates in this.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, I think she might even remember, she was not one of my Confederates. I think she was actually one of the people
she was the one that
said
got...
that, and I have it on cassette, by the way. But,
cool.
but she was mad. She was mad. So maybe you don't share this with her.
Oh yeah. Oh no.
But I had the other Confederates say, I said, how far did it move? It moved an inch. It moved 3 inches. And then when it got to the person, your wife, how far did it move? I moved this. And then afterwards, when I debriefed, I said it didn't move at all. You know, not many people were
She's
happy.
like, yes, it did.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Yeah. She's not allowed to listen to this episode.
So what? You're not gonna be able to keep this one.
She's not allowed to listen to this episode.
So the point there is that, to your point, yes, if something by way of normative conformity can cause a distortion or can cause a belief of something that is seen, and something that is just, you know, if there was an array of sights and shapes that appeared to be humanoid and appeared to be doing something, and somebody was convinced in the way that it is night, so it is a time of anxiety, it is a time of tension, it is a time where when you are in fear and you're being convinced of what that fear is, you may believe you're seeing something you don't see. But how is that in so many different accounts? And to your point, those people who are serving as sheriffs and of people that see and who have served in the war, how are they all seeing the same thing, describing it the same way,
that's my whole
and
thing.
Being very legitimate kinds of validated kinds of people?
Yeah, a hardened reporter, a hardened sheriff that's seen all sorts of stuff, police officers, medical people. They're not going to say, oh yeah, they're not going to be convinced by somebody else. They're the type of person that if they had been in an experiment like that, they're cynical. They're just going to be like, well, you can say what you want, but this is what I see. You know, because that's, especially back in that day, those are the kind of people that got those jobs.
Yep.
You know, they didn't have, and we live in a time period now where people are heavily influenced by groupthink because we have social media.
Correct.
And we have all this stuff. You got to remember, back in that time period, people were serious individualists.
Yes. Yeah, like Ralph Waldo Emerson. A lot of those writers were emphasizing self-reliance in the midst of the crowd. Be the individual. You know, you don't have that right now. Right now, we're all made of leather. You know why? Because we're
all going to get tan.
No, because we're easily swayed.
That's true. We're easily swayed. No, but you think about, too, the kind of people that moved west, that inhabited the mountain regions, that inhabited the western towns, that inhabited Arizona and all these places that were not very habitable. They are hardcore, self-reliant people.
Rugged.
They do not care, what you think. And they're not going to be swayed unless they see it themselves. You know? And that's why a lot of these weird tales, like Bigfoot sightings and some of the people that you get these tales from gold prospectors and people that are mountain men and trappers, and they're not the kind of people that are just going to come and tell some tall tale. I mean, most of the time, these people have no personality. That's why they're out there, because they just don't get along with people.
Yep.
So they'd rather be out there in the middle of nowhere doing their own thing, being left alone. But if that guy shows up, it's the whole Sigma male thing. If that guy shows up and starts telling you, hey, I just saw this thing that had glowing eyes and big wings, and he came at me 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I kind of think that he's kind of a credible source.
I think so too. So I'm gonna probably have to get going here.
Okay.
We just went over an hour.
What do we want to talk about next week?
I wouldn't mind talking more about this, but maybe
Okay.
do something else. What I don't care. What sounds good?
Well, let me look at the topics. We could talk about. So we talked about time travel. We're talking about the Mothman. Well, we could talk about the Hollow Earth since we sort of touched on it a little bit this time.
Let's do that. I like that.
All right, Hollow Earth next time.
Hallowed be thy earth.
Everybody,
Earth.
this has been the Hidden Citadel. Thank you for listening, and come back and check us out next time when we talk about the Hollow Earth.
The watchman replies, morning is coming, but night will soon return.